Secretary of the Department of Budget and Management, lawyer Ivan John Enrile Uy, who became chairman of the former Commission on Information and Communications Technology, is set to return in the ICT field as the next DICT chief.
Outgoing President Duterte led his final cabinet meeting as transition for the incoming Marcos administration begins.
The Commission on Elections is investigating almost 1,000 incidents of reported vote buying during the election period, including cases of election fraud. In this era of digitized government process and communication, we discussed. We will be joined by our guests and the other chiefs when we return. Welcome to the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin online in Manila. Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, and dito po sa Mandaluyong kasama natin Ed Lingao of One News. Chiefs, good evening.
Good evening.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Anong balita, Ami?
Mukhang handang-handa na si President Duterte na magkaraoke, no? In his retirement.
Biglang natalbog niya si Robin Padilla eh. Hindi mo.
Sharon Cuneta.
Robin
And
Padilla,
also,
yung
of course,
kanyang
si
ano.
Berna.
Okay.
Yung kanyang
Sige.
pang
Sige.
video ka na ano. Na,
Pero talagang
rendition.
ano tawag dito? Talagang ang
Handa na.
despedida na nga ang tawag eh. Despedida
Oo nga
na nga yung handaan kagabi. But anyway, sige, but also there's been a number of appointments also sa
Yes.
cabinet, and we'll try to go through each of them as soon as we know who's going to be there. But we do know right now the incoming Information and Communications Technology Secretary. He's here with us tonight, Attorney Ivan John Uy. Attorney Uy, good evening. Welcome to the Chief, sir.
Good evening.
Magandang
Hello, sir.
gabi po, Ami, Robbie, and Ed. I'm glad to be back in your show.
Opo,
This
sana.
time as secretary.
Opo. At saka sana po
Yes,
stable
so-
ang internet connection natin. Baka maganda. Sige. But anyway, speaking of internet connection, sir, a serious question because we've had finally our taste of DICT. Parang na-preview na sa atin yan. But, you mentioned DICT for a lot of people. For a lot of people, they're just thinking, internet speed. For a lot of people, they're thinking, e-commerce. For a lot of people, they're thinking, okay, baka gumanda ang serbisyo ng gobyerno. In your own words, sir, how do we make people appreciate what the DICT is and what it's supposed to be? What is your vision for what ultimately the DICT's job is?
The DICT's job would be to have a digitally empowered citizenry participating in the increasing digital global economy, making us a competitive player in the world market.
Okay, so that's the vision. But sa realidad
Yes.
po, ano yung baseline natin? Where are we starting from, particularly relative to our neighbors in Southeast Asia, for example?
Based on our last check, our internet speed actually has increased significantly. I think this is attributable to the additional capital investments that all the telcos have put in, especially on the 5G network. And this was pushed because of, I think, the entry of a third telco that pushed the competition. So with that, we see a greatly improved connectivity in terms of speed, in terms of service, although I feel that there's still much to be desired. The costs have gone down a bit, but it's still pretty high. So we need to continue to push for the lowering of the costs.
Sir, pa-baseline lang sir ng konti. I know we do get all sorts of figures from all over the world about our situation in terms of connectivity, in terms of internet reach. Pero I seldom see kasi local figures, locally sourced figures. Where are we right now as far as connectivity goes?
Well, I haven't received the figures yet. No, I'm basically 2 years old from the announcement of the president, and I haven't met with our regulators yet to actually get those details on our baseline. But that's what I aim to do as soon as I meet with them. What we're currently excited about is the entry of Starlink into our country, and that will actually jumpstart our connectivity, especially in the remote areas.
While you're talking about digital empowerment, kasama sa mga na-empower yung mga criminally minded. And since
Correct.
we're just coming out of the elections, there are accusations as well na ginamit daw yung digital platforms for vote buying. And syempre, even before that, we've had a lot of fraud using digital technology. Offhand, ano yung naiisip niyong priorities that you can do pagpasok niyo sa department to address these problems?
Well, pinaka-importante ngayon is digital literacy, especially what we call cyber hygiene. I think this has to be taught even in grade school, especially now, because of the COVID situation. Kids are suddenly thrown into a digital platform where they have to study online. And however, they're going into the platform in complete innocence and naivety. Hindi sila na-warn that this platform opens them up no, to possible cyber criminals and cyber fraudsters. So dapat kasama yun sa curriculum. I think importante sa DepEd that while children are being taught online, that they also be taught best practices in protecting themselves against these cyber threats. So dapat basic yan in our elementary education.
So you will be discussing this with the incoming Education Secretary. And sino gagawa ng module niyan? Palagay ko dapat kayo, no?
The ICT can help produce that module, and then it can be disseminated through the platforms that the DepEd currently has already.
No, ako po, hindi ako nangungutya. This is a serious question. How important is the digital literacy of the cabinet as well? I mean, you have an economic team coming in, very good as far as a lot of the reviews from the sector is concerned. But let's face it, these are all septuagenarians who are going to run the economy and who are going to run our digital economy. Sa DepEd right now, outgoing, this is something that we asked also. I mean, we're going to get a younger education secretary, so that matter. How do you think, how important is that we have a digital literate officials as well, not just in the DICT?
Yes, actually, it's very important. And I'm fully aware that although most of our economic team are of a certain age, but after talking to them, they actually understand very well the impact of digitalization in the line of work that they will be in. And in fact, they have been pushing for a lot of ICT-enabled services within their field of specialty. So I think they may not be programmers. They don't need to be, so long as they understand that ICT literacy in the sense of understanding the technology, understanding how the technology can be leveraged in order to make us more competitive and to make us better protected against these threats. I think that would be already a significant win. If you would recall, when I was in the Supreme Court, when I was the CIO of the Supreme Court, I had to teach the justices of the Supreme Court on how to use computers at that time. And you know the age of the justices of the Supreme Court and most of the judges. So initially, they're a little difficult to teach, but the important thing is once they get into it, there's actually no stopping them from continuing and enjoying actually the experience.
Yeah, but that's actually a much better example to the same question, diba? In Supreme Court. Based on your experience and from what you've observed, I mean, how much further have we gotten in the capacity of the Supreme Court, for example, in the courts, to appreciate the nuances and the implications of how digital is changing everything, commerce, security, privacy, and so on?
Well, that's probably an area that is lacking in educating our judges and our prosecutors on not just using the new technology, but on studying what are the legal effects and implications that these technology bring to the legal system, whether it refers to electronic contracting, online payment systems, how do you do the auditing on those things? Activity, we deal with data privacy issues, we deal with the hacking, but I think they're learning very fast. But I think the education system to be cyber literate should still be further improved. Not only on the adjudicatory side, but also on the law enforcement, as well as the prosecutorial side of things.
We've just come out of one of the most toxic election campaigns, no? And I think lahat naman ng parties, we're all complaining about disinformation, trolling, all this fake news. Do you have any idea sa ngayon how to deal with this problem? Or are you going to deal with the problem?
Well, it's a
Not part of
double-edged
your
sword.
mandate. Yeah.
It's actually a double-edged sword, Ami.
Yeah.
We also have to deal with the freedom of speech, and so sometimes these trolling and fake news can fall under abuse, no? Abuse of their right to free speech. But we have to strike a balance, because if we enforce, use the full force of the law in enforcing it, it might affect legitimate reporting, no, of news and legitimate free expression. So these have to be studied very well and specifically targeted. One area is most of these actually come out on social media. And social media is a private platform that is provided by private entities. So they have a terms of use agreement for free use of these sites. And if you violate those sites, you get censured or punished. However, there has been also criticism of overreach, where sometimes free speech actually is curtailed by an indiscriminate tagging, whether we call it red tagging or reporting or many other ways to curb those avenues. So it's really a delicate balance. But
Okay, but what about registering the SIM card? Kasi we had that bill and na-veto siya eh. Registering the SIM
Yes.
card and the account, yung social media account. Are you in favor of that?
yes, actually, from a law enforcement perspective, that's going to be very helpful. It will probably reduce instances of fraud by using these unregistered SIM cards, no, in enticing people to give up their PIN numbers or fooling them with a job offer that doesn't exist, and the Nigerian scams using these unregistered numbers. But again, we also have to consider that that could also curtail some form of freedom that might be protected under our constitution.
Right.
So the president actually vetoed that, but I think the bill could stand for improvement.
Yes,
And
but
I think once it's improved, it should be able to meet the requirements of the law.
Yes, but to that point, Attorney Uy, you're right. President Duterte vetoed it, but he vetoed it specifically on the insertion to include real names for social media. So, I mean, the registration of SIM card is one thing, and you've made your position there clear. But where do you stand on what President Duterte used as actually his basis to veto it, specifically the proposal, the inserted proposal, to require Filipinos to use their real names in social media?
Well, I think that could serve as a deterrent for any abuse, especially on the social media side, and we would be able to easily identify fake identity or fake trolls. No, we often call them trolls. These are all fictional people acting like they are real people and doing a lot of mischief online.
Pero Sec,
So I think
yes, Sec, we understand. Pero Sec, on the other hand, you also have famous Filipino writers who write under pen names or write with pen names.
that's correct.
So
That's
what
correct.
would be the difference?
On the paper side, yeah,
Diba?
we do have pen names, and
So what
and
would be the
sometimes
difference?
because they express certain ideas that may not be acceptable to a large segment of society, and they need to protect themselves and their families from the repercussions of those. So again, on the old world counterpart of pen names, that would definitely be something that it's an analogous situation.
Yes, sir. But my point being, what would make it different from using a different name on social media? I mean, you have actors who use screen names, you have writers who use pen names, and what should bar anybody from using another name on social media? I mean, isn't that also as well freedom of expression?
Yeah, that's actually a good observation. Yeah, actors, we have actors who really use their screen name and they do not use their actual name. So by requiring them to use their actual names, that might destroy the image that they're trying to project as a screen idol or a TV personality. So those are things. It's complicated. Those are things that need to be considered by our legislators when they draft the law.
Okay. May iba po ng konti. Speaking of law, yung prior to your coming in as the ICT Secretary, the Public Service Act was already passed. That should bring in and allow for more investment in the ICT.
You're getting choppy.
Ito pa, malinaw po ba ito?
Hello?
Hello?
Public Service Act.
Incoming
Public Service
DICT
Act, okay,
Secretary Ivan Uy. Malinaw na po ba signal? Kamusta po?
Yes.
Okay.
Nagpaparamdam po.
Dapat. Hindi pa naman nag-uumpisa ang term ni incoming Secretary Uy. Sir, the Public Service Act has already been passed. That should open up more investments into the ICT sector. I'm just wondering, beyond the PSA, is there anything else on your legislative wish list? Is there any other policies that you think is still important to bring in over the next 6 years?
Well, I still need to study that, but the Public Service Act is really a very, very good, timely legislation, considering that a lot of our areas of business have actually been nationalized, and it has stymied a lot of investment opportunities where our development has been compromised because of these nationalist requirements. So the amendments to the Public Service Act is one big boost to not only attract better and more investments into our country, but actually help us develop the infrastructure that would be needed to bring our country and our government into the digital age. So we look forward to more investments coming in the next few years.
Attorney, you're one of the officials recruited who work with the Noynoy Aquino administration. So, hindi ka naman rabid dilawan, ano? Kaya lang, how did Bongbong Marcos approach you for this job?
Well, as he said, his primary requirement now is competence. So he doesn't care whether you carry which color. Sabi niya na after May 9, he became color neutral. It's no longer any color, whether you're red, you're pink. We are now all red, white, blue, and yellow. We are now the Filipino as a group. And in order to bring our country forward, we cannot have this kind of divisiveness where political alliances would reign supreme over the future of our country. We are currently facing a lot of challenges with the pandemic, with rising fuel prices and energy crisis that's booming. This war in Ukraine that's limiting a lot of supply of vital commodities, like for instance wheat, where we anticipate facing a shortage soon because of the continuing problems in Ukraine. So these are not easy problems, and we have to tackle them as a nation. And I think it's time that we bring ourselves up and rally behind our leadership and work for the benefit not of the UNI team, not of the Pink Lawans, not of anybody, but for the Filipino nation.
Did Bongbong Marcos have any specific instructions to you with regards
Yes.
to your new job?
Yes, he actually gave me several marching orders
Mhm.
on different aspects. No, one is on digital connectivity. He wanted me to work on providing connectivity, good connectivity with reasonable cost, especially in the remote areas where our primary telcos could not go there. These are what we call the missionary areas. The recent approval of Starlink into this by giving them the vast license, I think would be a good jump start, because now we can connect the internet to all these remote islands where there are small communities, mostly fishing villages, that have been isolated from technology because of lack of connectivity, lack of electricity, and so on. So that's one part. Second part is on e-governance. He wants to address the many pain points that our citizenry often face whenever they do transactions with government. Pila, ang hahaba ng pila, ilang ahensya na pupuntahan. So just to do a certain transaction, whether you want to open a business, ilang araw kayong mawawala sa employment because of all the documentation and all the red tape that we have to go through. So we aim to reduce that and provide ease of doing business for our citizenry to access. Third is on the digital connectivity is to improve the connectivity so that more opportunities can be given to e-commerce, so that our kababayans who are in the provinces can now market their goods, or their services worldwide, and they're able to do that once they have good connectivity and at reasonable cost. And all this connectivity will boil down to a lot of benefits. We can do telemedicine, especially on this COVID pandemic situation. A lot of people are getting sick, but they do not have access to basic medical advice or consultation or services because they cannot talk to doctors who are not present in those areas. So with telemedicine, using this connectivity, they can seek the advice of doctors who can prescribe them some basic access to medicine. And also on the education side, our kids have all gone, a lot of them have gone online for their education without the face-to-face education. So with better connectivity, we now would be able to provide better access to education to the areas where there is no connectivity. So these are some of the many services that can ride on because we're able to provide the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure that we so badly need.
Yeah, Attorney Uy, you mentioned a lot already, and certainly that gives us a glimpse on some of the priorities and the vision of the incoming president. You mentioned connectivity, governance, e-commerce opportunities in telemedicine to education and so on. In any of it,
Factor in our digital movement, we've seen increasing amount of cybercrime, cyber fraud, not to mention defending ourselves from potential state-sponsored cyber terrorism acts. You would see this happening in several conflicts around the world where the war has actually started without firing a single bullet. They launch it with first a cyber attack, and that's the type of defenses that and capabilities that we need to build up in the country.
And final question na lang po, for all of these, from the opportunities to the threats, again, we round back to baseline. Do we have everything we need, at least to put up a decent effort in all of these things? Or is there something that we really need to invest in?
we do need to invest, first of all, in talent. That's why there's an effort to build up a digital workforce. And I understand that there's a bill pending in Congress now, sponsored by some very forward-looking senators to build up a digital workforce, because that digital workforce will now be the ones that we will use not only to develop applications, no, but also to service. We are one of the biggest BPO destinations around the world, and it is the second most. It is the second most. It's the second largest contributor to our GDP. So because of that, we actually need to develop more digital talents in order to be able to be competitive in those areas. So I think that would be a very important step.
Sir, one last question from me. But actually, I'm not sure if this question is for you or for DepEd, but I suppose it's for both of you. As we have been going along through the years, people have learned, more and more Filipinos have learned to use the internet. That much is very clear. But I don't know if we've also caught up in terms of learning how to make use or make proper use of the internet. Knowing how to use the technology is one thing. Knowing how to maximize the technology might be another thing altogether. And that is why you have so much fake news, I suppose. That's why you also have a lot of trolling and a lot of irresponsible activity on social media and online. So I'm trying to fish from you what you think could be the best way to maximize communications technology, the internet for Filipinos. Iba po dun sa iba po yun dun sa marunong gumamit ng internet, ha?
Tama po. Actually, digital literacy is not just knowing how to use the computer, but how to use the computer in a more meaningful way. And this is actually part of I think the Department of Education should provide education on that. But at the same time, the DICT can deploy modules. For instance, we can deploy apps, no, that will allow for a digital marketplace. So that produce coming from different areas can publish and use the digital marketplace to find buyers who can purchase their products at a fair price and eliminate predatory pricing, especially from middlemen. So those kinds of interventions. We can develop actually not just a digital marketplace, but also an e-payment system where they can also be paid for their goods or their services online. So that I think can be some interventions that the DICT can help them, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are several digital marketplaces out there, mostly foreign owned, no? But e-commerce platforms. So we can improve on that, or we can help people access those more, or if there are any peculiarities in the local marketplace that are not addressed by those e-commerce platforms, then the DICT can look for local providers or encourage local providers to develop those platforms for our local needs.
Okay, Attorney Ivan John Uy. Attorney, maraming salamat po.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat.
Thank you, sir.
Attorney
Thank you.
Uy is the incoming Information and Communications Technology Secretary. Maraming salamat po. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Welcome back to the Chiefs here on One News. And now joining us is COMELEC Commissioner Attorney George Garcia. Sir, magandang gabi. And nice to see you again. I just saw you a while ago.
Magandang gabi po, Sir Ed, Ma'am Ami. Magandang gabi po sa inyo.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us, sir. Sir, I'd like to talk again about our what we were talking about a while ago. Although, of course, we're talking about a different set of audience right now. But there's a proposal now from COMELEC to regulate social media. Before anything else, could you run us through what you have in mind? Exactly what is it that you want to regulate in social media and how?
Yeah, of course po, kanina na-explain ni future Secretary of the ICT, si my good friend, Attorney Ivan Uy. Now, of course, there will always be constitutional issues such as the freedom of expression at saka yung freedom of speech. Pero again, I would like to clarify, hindi po yung social media regulation as a whole in general.
Yes,
It should be social media regulation during the period of the campaign in order to protect not only the candidates, not only the political parties, but likewise to protect the general public. Alam niyo po kasi ang problem natin sa social media, kung nakita niyo po yung guidelines namin on social media regulation, we merely required the candidates to submit to the Commission on Election their social media accounts. And at the same time, that number two, ang sumunod na regulation namin, that anybody, whether it is the social media account of somebody, not necessarily a candidate, who are actually promoting the candidacy of another is to be considered as the social media account of that particular candidate. Doon po, buti hindi kami naki-question. Doon pala, baka may serious issue na doon. Kasi pwedeng sabihin, paano kung 10 milyon ang supporters ko na nagpo-promote ng candidacy ko? Ibig sabihin nyo po, 10 milyong social media accounts to be charged sa akin as my social media account simply because it's promoting my candidacy. Pero bakit po namin ginawa yon? Ginawa namin yon because we wanted to at least, kahit na attempt man lang, to regulate social media as far as the Commission on Election is concerned. But because of the absence of the law, we were forced to do that. Ano po kami, hindi namin papayagan lang na basta wala na lang regulation ang social media. Hindi pa pwedeng basta lang wala. Kaya po naglagay kami ng kahit paano provision to regulate social media by the Commission on Election. But that is not enough. Why? Because there should be a law to regulate social media, at least as far as campaigning is concerned.
Sir, but specifically, what would you want to regulate? I mean, ano yung mga parameters that you have in mind?
Yes, number one po, yung expenses sa paggamit ng social media.
Opo.
Content, definitely we cannot intrude into the content simply because that will be a prior restraint doon sa karapatan ng mga gagamit ng social media during the campaign period. Pero number three, would like to likewise punish with a higher penalty yung those who are involved in trolling. Nabanggit po ni Ma'am Ami kanina sa una nating panauhin, yung trolling talaga kasi medyo modern cancer of the society na nakasisira ng karangalan ng isang tao. Yan, kahit pa sabihin mong politiko, we would like to punish them. It should not only be punishing them with cyber libel. It should be more than cyber libel. Because at least yung cyber libel po, frontally alam nyo Alam nyo kung sino yung nagla-libel sa'yo using the device. Pero yung po kasi sa trolling, they are hiding themselves doon sa mga fake accounts. Hinahide pa nila yung sarili nila sa kung ano-ano. And therefore, that makes it more aggravating. And so dapat po, may ibang punishment for that, may ibang definition as a crime for that. And we need Congress to do that. We cannot, by regulation or resolution, just punish an act as a crime because it belongs to Congress po.
Attorney, we have obviously so many questions about this kasi frankly nakakatakot. Pero I'll just jump straight to this question. Is there a model for this? Have you seen this work anywhere in the world where such regulations, even for a limited time and for a limited context, actually worked without endangering the civil and political rights of its citizens?
In certain states in the United States, they're attempting to regulate social media. But of course, there's always this issue, I would really readily admit, sir, there is really this issue of intruding into a purely constitutionally guaranteed right of the freedom of expression and of the press. There was an attempt before in our Congress, former Speaker Bebot Alvarez sponsored a bill regulating social media, in the Philippines. Of course, it did not pass the scrutiny of the House of Representatives. It didn't even pass the Senate, and therefore it died a natural death in the House of Representatives. What I'm just saying is, if the COMELEC will just be just looking at everything during the campaign, wala man lang po kaming gagawin. Basta lang po kami magpapasa ng mga regulations or resolution na wala naman pong pangil, wala naman pong ngipin, wala naman pong specifics. Pagtatawanan din po kami, kita niyo po yung mga nakikita natin ngayon sa social media. Parties, candidate versus another candidate, parties versus another candidate, parties versus one party. So pagka po ganun, para magiging kasing incompetent sa mata ng mga kababayan natin ang Commission on Election. And that's the reason why at least we are asking Congress to at least perhaps we start a debate on how we can regulate social media during the campaign. It may not be passed during this next Congress. It may be passed later. But the point is at least we are starting to debate on this matter. Maganda pong papag-usapan na rin po natin. Ako po I'm always an advocate of protecting basic human rights. It's enshrined in our Constitution. But sometimes, and most often naman po, even the Supreme Court recognizes that the rights will always be subject to certain regulations, especially if it will violate the rights of another. Yun naman po yung sa atin, maprotektahan lang po yung karapatan ng iba. And so, on how to do this, I will really admit, sir, wala pa akong masyadong
Ako rin
nasa
naman,
isip.
attorney. Aaminin ko rin naman sa inyo, pati naman ako, hindi ko rin alam yung sagot. I think we all acknowledge the problem. My concern is, when we start telling ourselves that, well, we have to try something, di ba? And that's essentially what we're saying.
Yes, sir.
Usually, there are always unintended consequences when we say that. I mean, among other things, it creates a false sense of security. Every time you create new rules as well, you basically allow people who are ahead of the game to also game those rules ahead of us. Actually, iniisip ko nga, sa bahay ko nga, hindi ko ma-regulate social media. I mean, in all honesty. And it sounds
Yes,
like
sir.
when we talk about let our legislators at least debate this, the image in my mind are Gen Zs, millennials, laughing at the titos and titas who are deluding themselves into thinking that our generation and our policy makers can actually get ahead of the game when the fact is we are so obsolete in trying to even understand the game. And I guess my point is, isn't there danger there as well in that kind of a mindset na, well, subukan na lang natin kung ano man pwede natin gawin because we could end up shooting ourselves in the foot even more.
Ako naman po, sir, there's always danger in everything, especially if it is something regulating or something limiting or restricting the exercise of basic human rights. However, I'm not that so afraid simply because there is the Supreme Court. So long as our Supreme Court exists, so long as the power of judicial review is there, then there is nothing to fear. I always believe in the majesty of our courts that any time that any attempt to suppress basic human rights, the Supreme Court will always be there to protect it and to affirm it.
And I'm glad you brought it there because this doesn't make it so much of a stretch. But that's what people said about the anti-terror law. And while we're waiting for cases to get to the Supreme Court, so the Supreme Court can set the parameters and the precedents, there are people who are in fact already in prison over very questionable charges, precisely because somebody said, we have to do something about this and didn't think it through.
Yes, sir. I really understand that, and I really agree with you as far as that issue, that particular issue is concerned. Maybe really it boils down into the issue of legislation. It should start from the source. It should start from the issue of legislation. Doon pa lang po dapat sa legislation ay plan change unless we do not trust our Congress or our legislature. But I think po, kasi kung pababayaan lang po natin, especially during the campaign, especially during the 45-day period of the campaign for local and 90-day period for national, it may not be that much. Sabi nyo nga po, but then it may be 1 day, 2 days, but still that is regulation. But when you file your candidacy believing that the COMELEC, especially the Commission on Election, tasked by the Constitution to regulate things during the entire period of the campaign, when you file your candidacy, you signify your intention. That is a waiver on your part that you will be governed by whatever the COMELEC will promulgate so long as it is consistent with the Constitution and the law.
Okay. Lipat naman ako, Commissioner, sa vote buying. Kasi there's a report na you are investigating 1,111
Yes,
cases and wherein you will be asking the respondents to explain. Paano nyo na-distinguish doon kung ano yung which cases merit an explanation from respondents? Kasi I understand you received a lot of reports, tips about vote buying.
Yes, ma'am. Yung pong aming yung task force kontra bigay, ina-analyze po nila lahat yung mga 1,100 na na-send sa kanilang account at saka doon po sa Gmail account. And so tiningnan po nila kung ano yung mga sa palagay nila ay wala man lang ebidensya, wala man lang pong basta lang sinabi si Ma'am Ami Pamintuan namimili ng boto na ganyan, wala allegation without any sufficient evidence or proof. So yun pa lang negative na po yun. But more or less we have 300 complaints filed in social media, and we requested these people if they can formalize their complaints. Talaga pong that's the test of whether we can proceed with the case. Kasi po, if there is no complainant, there are no witnesses, then how can we proceed with the case? Take note po, Ma'am Ami, criminal case po kasi ito. At dahil criminal case, the COMELEC will just be serving as if it is the prosecutor. The COMELEC will just be serving as if it is the fiscal, determining, mukhang guilty ba yan? May probable cause ba yan? Hindi po kami magsasabing guilty yan, it will be the courts. Ang ayaw po namin, Ma'am Ami, is magpa-file kami ng cases pagkatapos madidismiss ng court dahil ang kailangang evidence ay evidence of guilt beyond reasonable doubt. And lo and behold, there were at least 3 complainants who courageously had said we will be filing and they will be filing formal affidavits or complaints against these individuals. Sabi nga po kanina, 3 may not be a small number, 3 may be a very good number, at least to start with the prosecution of these individuals. So long as there are people who are so decisive po, Ma'am Ami, who wanted to proceed and who wanted to teach a lesson 1 or 2 sa ating mga kandidato, then we will live with that and we will definitely study the case and titingnan namin and then we will prosecute if indeed necessary po.
Yan ba yung sa Cavite, yung 3 complainants?
Meron pong isa doon sa Cavite, meron din pong dalawa naman sa ibang magkaibang lugar po. Doon naman po sa local po ito, pero meron din po sa national candidates kami iniimbestigan. We wanted to conduct nga po motu proprio. Kaya lang po kulang po yung ebidensya. Ang problem po talaga, at sana po ma-realize din natin po, sa mga nagko-complain po, sana po once na sinimulan natin, ituloy po natin. Hindi yung after the election, medyo either natakot or either nawala na lang ng gana kasi natalo yung kanilang gustong kandidato or dahil nakakausap sila ng kandidato, wag nyo na lang ituloy yan dahil meron namang consideration. Sayang po yun kasi kung gano'n na willing para tayo makipag-compromise, willing tayo isuko yung ating laban at complaints, wala pong mangyayari lahat sa case. And that's precisely the reason why wala tayong napapakulong sa issue ng vote buying. Kaya po isa rin sa dapat nating tingnan sa susunod na kongreso. Baka pwede mas taasan natin ang penalty para sa vote buying and we will have to make it easy for anybody to file cases of vote buying and we will not be restricted by the rules.
So that's,
What about yung binanggit niyo sa Ilocos Sur na case na a large amount of money withdrawn doon sa Ilocos Sur at sinabi nga ng Anti-Money Laundering Council sinight nga nila
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us more about it.
Hindi pa po namin mabigay yung mismong detalye pa no? Kasi po siyempre under the AMLAC law, medyo may confidentiality yung investigation dyan. In fact, kahit nga po yung pag-freeze ng account ng halimbawa ng involved na pinagsususpetsahan sa money laundering, hindi kaagad nire-reveal sa public but it is an internal matter between the Court of Appeals and the Anti-Money Laundering Council. So we would just let na po muna the Anti-Money Laundering Council to do their investigation, but we will be ready to prosecute just in case the AMLAC will submit to us their findings. Maganda po yun. Alam niyo po, Ma'am Ami, first time ko na naka-encounter na yung nakarating yung complaint sa AMLAC at yung AMLAC ay nag-a-act on this. So medyo magandang simula po, maganda rin natin pag-isipan. Alam niyo po, vote buying is not included as one of the crimes as enumerated in the predicate crimes as enumerated sa Anti-Money Laundering Council. Baka po dahil dito, pwede natin ding simulan yung pag-iisip na baka pwede nang ma-include as a predicate crime din yung vote buying.
Pero sir, historically...
It will need a law, di ba? It will need an amendment.
That is correct, Ma'am Ami. That's correct po.
Pero so, di ba, historically, yung problem with prosecuting vote buying is that almost always, ang nahuhuli lamang ay mga foot soldiers, yung mga tagapagbudbud ng pera, hindi yung kandidato.
Yes, sir Ed. Alam nyo, sa amin po sa criminal law, there is such a thing as yung mga conspiracy. Kaya lang po, pagka po kasi special law, there is no conspiracy. Conspiracy is present only in crimes punishable by the revised penal code unless the special law by itself punishes conspiracy as a crime. Eh dito po, dahil nga po yung ating batas sa vote buying ay 1985 ba naman, bago pa yung 1987 Constitution. If we can only amend, for example, that specific provision on vote buying, and we will just say that even if si Sir Ed Lingao ay tao lamang ng isang kandidato, and it can easily be proven na siya ay kumikilos for and behalf of that candidate, and kasama siya ever since, then we can relate that already with the candidate. And therefore, that is now conspiracy that the act of one is the act of all. That Sir Ed may just be an accessory and he may be the principal, but just the same, the act committed by the accessory is the act committed by the principal. If a law can be passed that can easily relate the act of one versus the act of another, then it's very easy to prosecute.
Commissioner, same question ko kanina. Wala bang model in any other part of the world, in any other democracy, in any other electoral exercise? How do other developing countries address the question of the vote buying? I'm asking this on the assumption that, nangyayari rin ito sa ibang bansa.
Sa atin po kasing pagkakaalam, sir, ay mukha po kasing yung vote buying, mukhang ano lang sa atin, mukhang tayo lang ang may ganyan, at ganyan din ka-bulgar yung vote buying sa atin. Kahit po dito sa ating...
Yeah, but that still begs the question, bakit? Diba? I mean, what are the other countries doing that we are not?
Maybe it's a question of really of number one, poverty. Maybe it's in the question also of culture. Maybe it's the question really of prosecution that they can be free of everything simply because hindi natin na po-prosecute at dahil sa madali namang kausapin, election lang yan, pagkatapos yan, kakausapin mo lang yung nagre-reklamo. So, because of that thinking, that culture na pwede ka naman makaligtas dito and therefore, mamili na lang tayo ng boto. Mas madali mamili kaysa ligawan pa sila. Yung bang quick fix lagi na nasa isip natin, kung maglalakad ako dyan, maiinitan ako, bibilhin ko na lang, magkano 500, 1,000 pesos, mas makakatipid pa ako kaysa maglalakad, baka mas mahal pa yung magagastos ko. Yung pong thinking na gano'n, kahit po nung sinusulat pa, kanina nga po pinag-uusapan ni na Sir Ed, doon sa isang programa, yung panahon pa ni Jose Rizal, uso na nga po yung pamimili rin ng mga ganyan, para lang makuha mo yung boto ng isang tao. So, ganyan po yung sa akin. I think po it's a part of our culture. In other culture, baka po meron din. Kaya lang mas medyo mas civil ng konti yung pamimili. Hindi katulad sa atin na Bulgaran. Mamudmud lang ng t-shirt, pamimili na. Pagpapakain lang, pamimili na ng boto. Dito pa nga po, pangako lang ay pamimili na rin ng boto.
So are you planning to propose reforms or initiate or ano yun, itutulak niyo ba yun sa Kongreso?
Definitely, Ma'am Ami, alam niyo po, yun po yung aking advocacy ever since. We should codify our election laws. We should revise the Omnibus Election Code. And therefore, dapat nga, sabi po kanina sa inyo pong discussion with the future Secretary Ivan Uy, dapat po i-update na natin yung mga batas natin patungkol sa Gen X, Gen Z, o anumang klaseng generation. A law will only be as good as when it is still accepted by the society. Ibig sabihin, kung yung pong mga batas naman natin ay 19 kopong-kopong na pagka tinugma mo ngayon sa ating present realities, wala na. For example po, vote buying. O sige, sabi bawal in cash or in kind. Paano po yung vote buying sa pamamagitan ng Paymaya? Paano po yung vote buying sa pamamagitan ng other modes na present realities using the internet? So paano po yung mga gano'n na pamimili? Wala po sa batas yun. Alam naman po natin pagka-criminal, pagka-election offense o criminal ang violation, evidence of guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Ang dali mag-create ng doubt. Wala sa batas loophole. How can I now be punished for an act that I had committed but which is not punished by this law?
Okay. Attorney George Garcia, mahaba pa pong usapan natin. Akalang tao, natapos ang eleksyon, tapos na ang usapan sa Comelec. Habang buhay pa rin dito.
Reforms po ang ating sunod naman.
Opo.
Opo,
Sige
reforms
po.
naman po ang sunod natin.
Okay. Attorney George Garcia, sir, maraming salamat
Thank you, sir.
po.
Maraming salamat
Attorney
po,
Garcia,
Muli.
of course,
you.
is
Thank you
a
po.
Comelec commissioner. And that will be all for this edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao and we are One News.